Thank you. The mute button helps to undo. Thank you, Brother Finn. My name is Andrew Weygandt. I'm the youth director here at St. David's, which means I have the privilege of meeting with a small group of high school and middle school students twice a month down in the church basement, the youth room. I'm also, during the rest of the week, working as a hospital chaplain, where I'm in a palliative care training program there. And if I'm being honest this morning, preaching does, of course, bring some nerves with it. It's been years since I preached, and that was in a very different church context. But I'm also feeling very grateful. Grateful for you all, for a number of familiar faces, people who I know love and support me, and also grateful for a gospel reading this morning that is familiar to us as well. One that we've maybe heard many, many times. One that even if you've never heard before, you just heard now. And I'd like for us to maybe take a second look at it together. In our gospel reading today, Jesus was eating with the sinners and tax collectors, as if they had their own table at the potluck. And religious leaders of the day start throwing a fuss about it. Why does he welcome them? Why does he eat with them? In response, Jesus tells three stories, three parables. The first parable is about a lost sheep. The second parable is about a lost coin. And the third parable, our gospel reading today, is about a lost son. You've probably heard it called the parable of the prodigal son. Prodigal is a funny word, though. You may already know this, but it doesn't mean wayward or off track in the way many people think. Prodigal means more reckless, extravagant, or lavish. Isn't that interesting? I wonder who's extravagant in this story. I'd like to read the parable again, but we're going to pause along the way, and rather than rush to the end to find some pithy moral of the story, I'd like for us to meander a bit. Let's linger and savor the details along the way. Even if you just heard this parable this morning, let's kind of turn the kaleidoscope of this story and see what new things show up in that light for today, for you, here, and now. There was a man who had two sons. The younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of property that will belong to me." So he divided his property between them. Apparently this father had very liquid assets at the time. But this younger son goes to his father, saying essentially, there's only so much wealth to be had, and I want my piece of the pie. When do I get what's coming to me? What, essentially his dad won't die quickly enough? That's how inheritance works, right? How gross. How terribly unloving. It's selfish. And I ask, what sort of parent would give away inheritance to a child like that? But here we see no hesitation, no defensiveness. I wonder how painful it must be to write that check and then to see it cashed. He didn't just lose an estate that day, he lost a son. And that hurts. It's a death of sorts. It's painful to say goodbye to the people we love. I imagine that this father's pain and sadness is even more complicated because he has a son who asked for it to happen. Normally it's the one grieving who gets inheritance, not the other way around. A few days later, the younger son gathered all he had and traveled to a distant country, and there he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his friends to feed the fields, not friends, who sent him to the fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself up with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. He was used to being given what he wanted. Now, he isn't given anything. I wonder if he was bitter about that at first. This son who took so much from his father, he's already managed to spend it all. He wasn't ready for a famine, but when it rains, it pours. I bet he's worried now, feeling desperate, out of money, out of food, and jealous of the pigs for eating better than he does. I don't really know what pods are, but that word always seems strange to me, that he's jealous of their pods. That sounds terrifying. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough to spare, and here I am dying of hunger? I will get up and go to my father. I will say to him, 'Father, I've sinned against heaven and before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' So he set off and went to his father." Seems like no one's doing well in this story. The son realizes he's at the end of his rope. His only choice is to go back. We even get to hear him practice his speech. He sounds broken, willing to take the bare minimum, remaining in servitude, just to get by. Whatever inner confidence he had before, I imagine, is gone now. It must have taken at least a bit of courage to go up to a father and ask for inheritance while that father is still alive. He sounds hopeless, defeated, going back with his tail tucked between his legs. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. And the son said to him, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son." But the father said to his slaves, "Quickly, bring out the robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger, sandals on his feet, and get the fatted calf and kill it. And let us eat and celebrate, for the son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." And they began to celebrate. Look at all the details here. The son was far off when dad saw him, but dad was filled with compassion and ran out to him. What a surprise to both of them. This selfish son returning and apologizing, and this wealthy father running down the road in order to hug and kiss the one who took him for granted. And notice the first word that the son says, "Father." "Dad, I'm sorry. I'm sorry." That takes some courage. Yes, bring out a robe, bring out the best one, put a ring on his finger, sandals on his feet, get the fatted calf, let's eat, let's celebrate. Who's extravagant in this story? Who's the prodigal here? Who is willing to lavishly spend everything? Who is abundant and generous with their love? What a joy it is. What a joy it must be to live with that sense of richness towards others. To give and give and give and then give some more. Knowing that love is not scarce. Love is abundant. And somehow, the story doesn't quite end here. Now his elder son was in the field, and when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked what was going on. He replied, "Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he has got him back safe and sound." Then he became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him, but he answered his father, "Listen, for all these years, I've been working like a slave for you, and I never disobeyed your command. Yet you've never even given me a young goat so that I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him." They're really into this fatted calf thing. But here we finally meet the other son, right? It says he's angry. I think anger often kind of comes with other emotions. He sounds bitter. Sounds cold, jealous. In some ways, that's understandable. The brother left him too, right? There's multiple broken relationships here. And when the younger son was gone, the family system probably reached some sort of equilibrium, and the eldest son got used to being the only son. Now that his brother's back, it shakes things up. It's a threat. But notice the parallels here. The father comes back outside, always ready to run out to his kids. The son doesn't start by saying father, though. This time he says, listen. He tells his father off. And just like his brother before, I imagine that this son thinks, there's only so much to go around, and I want my piece of the pie. When am I going to get what's coming to me? And once again, how gross is that? How unloving and selfish. What sort of parent would stand for this in the middle of their party? We don't see hesitation or defensiveness here. Then the father said to him, son. I actually looked up that word. I don't say this often, but in the Greek, that word is child. Not in a demeaning way, in a way that's vulnerable, that invites closeness. Then the father said to him, child, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice, because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found. How reckless, how extravagant, how lavish. You know, maybe at the outset it sounds like this story is an economic one. Inheritance, fatted calves and such. But it's a relational one. It's about love. Love is not scarce. Love is abundant. There was a father who had two sons. The younger, he knew he screwed up and was willing to take the bare minimum amount of love just to get by. The older son, he was willing to stick around and do whatever it took, and yet never knew he belonged. His father was generous with his love. Both sons got more than they asked for. There was always more available. Love is not scarce. Love is abundant. And there's more for you too. Not as you should be one day, but as you are right now, there's more love for you too. Amen.